Hello dear viewers, support me by subscribing to my channel and share my video if you like it, and also make sure you comment your thought. Now let's start the video. And so many days pass, while Daenerys try learning politics and other matters. The morning sun cast long shadows across the courtyard of Qohor, as Jon Snow stood before the great gates, watching a lone rider approach from the west. The man bore the colors of House Stark, a gray direwolf on a white field, and Jon's heart quickened with both hope and apprehension. It had been months since he'd received any word from Winterfell, and the sight of his father's banner stirred emotions he'd tried to keep buried. The rider dismounted, with the practiced ease of a man who'd spent weeks in the saddle. He was middle-aged, weathered by the road, with the practical garb of a Stark retainer. Jon recognized him vaguely, one of his father's men-at-arms, though not someone of particular importance. The man approached with a respectful bow. "Lord Snow," the messenger said, his northern accent a welcome sound in this foreign land. "I bring word from Lord Eddard Stark of Winterfell." Jon's throat tightened. "My father is well." "Aye, my lord." "Well, in thinking of you." The man reached into his saddlebags and withdrew a carefully wrapped parcel. "He bade me give you this, with his love and pride." Jon accepted the package with hands that trembled slightly. The wrapping was simple, but sturdy, designed to survive the long journey across 2 continents. As he began to unwrap it, he heard a soft whimpering from within. His eyes widened as he revealed a small wooden crate with air holes, and from within came the unmistakable sounds of a young animal. "7 hells," Jon breathed, carefully opening the crate. Inside, nestled in soft furs, was a direwolf pup, no larger than his fist. The creature was pure white, with red eyes that seemed to glow in the morning light. It looked up at Jon with an intelligence that seemed far beyond its tender age. "Found the litter south of Winterfell," the messenger explained. "The mother was dead, killed by a stag's antler through the throat. 6 little ones survived. Lord Stark said it was meant for you, white as snow, just like me," Jon finished softly, lifting the pup with gentle hands. The creature didn't struggle or cry out. Instead, it seemed to study Jon with those unsettling red eyes, as if recognizing something familiar. "There's a letter as well, my lord," the messenger added, producing a sealed parchment bearing his father's personal seal. Jon cradled the pup against his chest with one arm while breaking the seal with his free hand. His father's familiar script filled the page, and Jon's eyes misted as he read, "My dear Jon, by the time you read this, you will have met your new companion. The maesters say direwolves have not been seen south of the wall in over 200 years, yet here we found a litter. I cannot help but think the old gods meant for this one to find its way to you. The tales of your accomplishments have reached even Winterfell's halls. A merchant from Pentos spoke of the young wolf who conquered Qohor, who commands dragons and leads the armies in Dothraki. I confess, I scarce believed it until more reports arrived. My heart swells with pride at what you have become, though it aches that you are so far from home. You are no bastard, Jon Snow. You are my son in all the ways that matter, and you are a Stark. The wolf I send you is proof of that bond. You are part of our pack, no matter how far you roam. When you look upon this creature, remember that Winterfell's heart beats in your chest, and that your family loves you beyond measure. The realm grows darker with each passing day. War may come again, and when it does, the pack must be strong. I pray that your path will lead you home when the time is right. But until then, know that you carry our hopes and our love with you. Winter is coming, my son, but wolves do not fear the cold. Your loving father, Eddard Stark." Jon had to stop reading as tears blurred his vision. The weight of his father's words, the love and acceptance they contained, threatened to overwhelm him. The direwolf pup seemed to sense his emotion, nuzzling against his neck with a soft whine. "Ghost," Jon whispered, the name coming to him as naturally as breathing. "Your name is Ghost." The pup's ears perked up at the sound, and Jon could have sworn he saw approval in those red eyes. He looked up to find Daenerys approaching, her violet eyes curious and concerned.
"Jon, what news from the west?" she asked, noting his emotional state.
"Good news," Jon managed, his voice thick. "The best news." He showed her the letter and introduced her to Ghost, watching as her face softened at the sight of the tiny direwolf. "He's beautiful," she breathed, reaching out tentatively. Ghost sniffed her fingers before allowing her to scratch behind his ears. A true companion for a true wolf. My father says direwolves haven't been seen south of the wall in 2 centuries, Jon said, marveling at the pup's calm demeanor. Yet here he is. Perhaps the old gods are stirring, Daenerys suggested, her voice thoughtful. Dragons have returned to the world, and now dire wolves venture south. The age of legends may be beginning anew. Jon nodded, feeling the truth of her words. Everything was changing, the very fabric of the world shifting in ways both wondrous and terrifying. He tucked his father's letter safely away and settled Ghost in a makeshift bed of furs in his chambers before joining Daenerys for their morning meal. The great hall of Qohor buzzed with activity, as Jon's captains reported on the city's reconstruction and the integration of their new Dothraki allies. The Golden Company's defeat had sent shockwaves throughout Essos, and delegations from various free cities had begun arriving to negotiate new trade agreements and alliances. Jon listened with half his attention, his mind still dwelling on his father's letter and the implications of Ghost's arrival. After the morning's business concluded, Jon found himself drawn to the practice yards where Daenerys was training with her sword. She moved with fluid grace, her Valyrian steel blade singing through the air as she worked through the forms Sari Jorah had taught her. Sweat glistened on her brow, and her silver-gold hair was pulled back in a practical braid. Your form is improving, Jon observed, leaning against the fence that surrounded the yard. Daenerys paused in her practice, turning to face him with a smile. High praise from the man who defeated Aegon Blackfyre in single combat. Jon shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. Aegon was skilled, but he was also arrogant. Arrogance makes men predictable. And what makes Jon Snow predictable? She asked, stepping closer. Nothing, I hope, Jon replied, with a slight smile. Though I've been thinking about what you said earlier, about the old gods stirring, about legends beginning anew. Daenerys set down her sword and moved to sit beside him on a low stone wall. What of it? I've been having dreams again, Jon admitted. Fire dreams, like the ones Thoros warned me about, but they're different now. Stronger, more vivid. And since you've been here, since your dragon eggs arrived, they've gotten worse, Daenerys guessed. Not worse, more intense, as if something is awakening. Jon turned to face her fully. I think it has to do with you, with us being together. Daenerys was quiet for a long moment, her violet eyes studying his face. I felt it too, she said finally. A pull, a connection. When I'm near you, I can feel the fire in my blood more strongly. It's as if we're meant to be together, Jon finished. The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Jon reached out tentatively, taking her hand in his. Her skin was warm, almost fevered, and he felt that familiar tingle of power where their flesh touched. Show me, Daenerys said suddenly. Show you what? The fire magic you've been learning from Thoros for years, and I've only just begun to understand what I am. Teach me. Jon hesitated. Fire magic was dangerous. Unpredictable, but the earnest look in Daenerys' eyes, the trust she was placing in him, made his decision for him. Very well, he said, but not here. Too many eyes, too many questions. That evening, as the sun set over Qohor's ancient walls, Jon led Daenerys to a secluded chamber in the depths of the palace. It had once been a storage room, but Jon had converted it into a private space for his magical studies. Candles lined the walls, and a small brazier sat in the center of the room, cold and waiting. Fire magic is about more than just creating flames, Jon began, kneeling beside the brazier. It's about understanding the essence of fire itself, its hunger, its passion, its transformative power. He placed his hands over the cold coals and closed his eyes, reaching deep within himself for that spark Thoros had helped him find years ago. The familiar warmth spread through his chest, down his arms and into his fingertips. When he opened his eyes, flames danced merrily in the brazier. How? Daenerys breathed, kneeling beside him. Feel the fire, Jon said, his voice taking on the cadence Thoros had used when teaching him. Don't just see it with your eyes. Feel it with your blood, your breath, your very soul. Daenerys stared into the flames, her breathing growing deeper and more rhythmic. Jon watched as her pupils dilated, as a flush spread across her cheeks. She was beautiful in the firelight, ethereal and dangerous. I can feel it, she whispered. It's like a song in my blood. Good, Jon said. Now reach out to it. Not with your hands, with your will. Daenerys extended her hands toward the flames, and Jon felt the shift in the air around them. The fire responded to her presence, growing brighter and taller. But there was something wild about it, uncontrolled. Careful, Jon warned, but it was too late. The flames roared upward, nearly reaching the ceiling. Daenerys gasped and pulled back, but the fire continued to rage. Jon quickly placed his hands over hers, his own power flowing out to calm and contain the blaze. "Easy," he murmured, his voice steady, despite the danger. "Fire is like a wild horse. It needs to be gentled, not broken." Together they brought the flames back under control, settling them to a manageable height. Daenerys was breathing hard, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and exhilaration.
That was...
she began. "Dangerous," Jon finished, "but also incredible. I've never seen anyone with such raw power." "It felt like I was going to burn from the inside out," Daenerys said, her hand still in his. "But also like I was finally alive for the first time." Jon understood. The fire magic was intoxicating, addictive in its way. It promised power beyond imagination, but at a cost that was often too high to pay. Jon and Daenerys collapsed backward, both breathing hard and covered in sweat. While Daenerys took out an egg from her pouch, and this egg was glowing with faint light and full of warmth, the egg rested between them. It felt more alive than before, and had an intoxicating feeling. "I felt the egg absorbed our magic somehow. What did we do?" Daenerys whispered. "I don't know," Jon admitted, "but whatever it was, we did it together." As if summoned by their words, Thoros appeared in the doorway, his weathered face grave with concern. "I felt the disturbance from 3 floors away," he said, his eyes taking in the scene. The brazier still burning, the 2 young people collapsed on the floor, and the dragon egg glowing softly between them. "Is it?" Daenerys began. Thoros approached carefully and placed his hand over one of the egg in Daenerys' pouch, without touching it. His eyes closed for a moment, and when they opened again, there was wonder in them. "Alive," he said simply. "But changed. You've bound it somehow, tied its fate to yours." He looked between Jon and Daenerys, with an expression that was equal parts admiration and concern. 2 flames together burn brighter, but they also burn faster. "What does that mean?" Jon asked, struggling to sit up. "It means you've taken the first step down a path that has no turning back," Thoros replied. "Your destinies are intertwined now, more than they ever were before. What affects one will affect the other." Jon looked at Daenerys, seeing his own uncertainty reflected in her violet eyes. They had sought to understand their power, to explore the connection between them, but instead they had forged something new and potentially dangerous. "The egg," Daenerys said, reaching for it. "When will it hatch?" "When it's ready," Thoros said, "and when you are. But be warned, the dragon that emerges will be unlike any that came before. It will be a creature of both ice and fire, of wolf and dragon. Guard it well, for it may be the key to everything that's coming." As if in response to his words, Ghost padded into the room, his red eyes fixed on the dragon egg. The direwolf pup showed no fear, only curiosity, as he approached and sniffed delicately at the warm shell. "Even the wolf knows," Thoros murmured. "The old powers are stirring, and the age of legends begins anew." King's Landing, the Red Keep. Tywin Lannister's POV. Lord Tywin Lannister stood in his solar. The latest reports from Essos spread across his desk like pieces of a vast and troubling puzzle. The morning light streaming through the tall windows illuminated the parchments bearing seals from Pentos, Braavos, and even distant courts. Each one told the same impossible story. "Jon Snow," he said, the name aloud, tasting its implications, like a fine wine that had turned to vinegar. "Bastard of Winterfell, conqueror of Qohor, commander of dragons." His grandson Joffrey sat across from him, fidgeting with a jeweled dagger and wearing an expression of petulant disbelief. "It's impossible, grandfather. A bastard cannot command dragons. The small folk love their tales. But surely, the small folk do not fund trading expeditions to Essos." Tywin cut him off coldly. "These reports come from merchants, from sellswords, from men who have seen the dragons with their own eyes. 2 of them, grown large enough to carry riders." Tywin picked up a particular report, one that had arrived just that morning from a Lannister agent in Pentos. Golden Company was also defeated and conquered by Jon Snow. 30,000 men, Tywin continued, his voice measured and controlled, despite the fury building in his chest. The largest army of Essos, all sworn to a bastard boy from the north. And now he has the Targaryen girl as well. Daenerys Targaryen is nothing, Joffrey spat. A beggar princess with delusions of grandeur. Tywin's green eyes fixed on his grandson with the intensity of a hunting cat. That beggar princess is the heir to Iron Throne, boy. And if these reports are true, she and the Snow Bastard have formed an alliance that could threaten everything we've built. The old lion rose from his chair and moved to the window, gazing out over King's Landing's sprawling expanse. Somewhere out there in the taverns and brothels, the common people were already whispering of the young wolf, who rode dragons, who had even united the Dothraki and conquered the free cities. Such stories had a way of spreading, of inspiring dangerous ideas in dangerous minds. "What do we do?" Joffrey asked, and for once his voice held genuine concern rather than bratty petulance. "We prepare," Tywin said simply. "We strengthen our alliances, shore up our defenses, and ensure that when Jon Snow finally turns his attention westward, and he will, we are ready for him." "You think he'll come here, to Westeros?" Tywin turned from the window, his expression grim. "He's Ned Stark's son, legitimate or not. The North is in his blood, and sooner or later, that blood will call him home. When it does, he'll bring dragons and Dothraki with him. The realm will burn unless we stop him first." The hand of the king moved to his desk and began drafting letters to the Reach, to Dorne, to every lord who owed the crown service or gold. The game was changing, and Tywin Lannister had not survived this long by failing to adapt. "Send ravens," he commanded, "to every bannerman, every ally, every lord who values stability over chaos. Tell them that a new threat rises in the east, and that the realm must stand united against it." As Joffrey hurried to obey, Tywin allowed himself a moment of grudging respect for his enemy. Jon Snow had achieved in months what most men could not accomplish in lifetimes. But respect did not mean acceptance, and Tywin had crushed worthier foes than a bastard boy with delusions of grandeur. The dragons would not save him when the full might of Westeros turned against him. Varys' POV. In the depths of the Red Keep, in chambers that officially did not exist, Varys the spider sat surrounded by his web of whispers and secrets. His soft hands moved delicately across a map of Essos, placing small carved pieces to represent the various players in the great game that was unfolding across the narrow sea. "Fascinating," he murmured to himself, his voice carrying its usual silky tone despite the fact that no one else was present to hear it. "Absolutely fascinating." The reports from his little birds in the free cities painted a picture that was both thrilling and terrifying. Jon Snow, bastard of Winterfell, student of Thoros of Myr, and now apparently something far more significant, had accomplished the impossible. Not only had he tamed dragons, but he had united the Dothraki and forged an alliance with Daenerys Targaryen that could reshape the known world. Varys picked up a small carved wolf and placed it on Qohor, then added a dragon piece beside it. The symbolism was not lost on him: ice and fire, wolf and dragon, the old prophecies made manifest in ways he had never anticipated. "My dear Illyrio," he said to the empty room, "I fear our carefully laid plans have encountered an unexpected variable." For years he and Illyrio had worked to position Daenerys Targaryen as the perfect tool for their purposes. A Targaryen with dragons, but one young and malleable enough to be guided. The plan had been elegant in its simplicity. Support her rise to power, then use her gratitude and inexperience to influence the realm's future. But Jon Snow changed everything. The boy was no mere sellsword or ambitious lordling seeking to use Daenerys for his own ends. He was something else entirely, a figure of prophecy perhaps, or simply a young man with the rare combination of power, intelligence, and moral conviction that made him truly dangerous to the established order. Varys rose from his chair and moved to a small cage where one of his little birds, a raven trained to carry messages across vast distances, waited patiently. He attached a coded message to its leg, one that would find its way to Illyrio and Pentos within days. "The game has changed," the message read in the cipher they had used for decades. "The wolf and dragon dance together, and their song may drown out all others. Adjust accordingly." As the raven disappeared into the night sky, Varys allowed himself a rare smile. Chaos was a ladder, as a wise man had once said, and Jon Snow's rise represented the most delicious chaos Varys had witnessed in years. The boy might disrupt their plans, but he also presented opportunities that a clever spider could exploit. After all, even wolves could be caught in webs, given the right bait and sufficient patience. The Queen's Fury. Cersei Lannister's POV. Queen Cersei Lannister paced the length of her solar like a caged lioness, her green silk gown rustling with each angry step. The reports from Essos lay scattered across her table, each one a fresh insult to her pride and a new threat to her children's future. Dragons, she spat, the word tasting like poison on her tongue. Dragons in the hands of a bastard and a whore. Her brother Jaime sat in a chair by the window, his golden hand resting on the arm, while his good hand held a cup of wine. His green eyes, so like her own, watched her with a mixture of concern and resignation. The reports could be exaggerated, he offered, though his tone suggested he didn't believe it himself. Merchants love their tales, and fear makes everything seem larger than it is. 30,000 army do not spring from merchants' tales, Cersei snapped. Nor do conquered cities or defeated sellsword companies. This bastard, this Jon Snow, has achieved more in months than Robert did in years of kingship. The comparison to her late husband was deliberate and cutting. Robert Baratheon had been a great warrior in his youth, but as a king he had been lazy, drunken, and ineffectual. The idea that Ned Stark's bastard might prove more capable than the man who had won the Iron Throne through conquest was galling beyond measure. "What does father plan to do?" Tammy asked. "What he always does," Cersei replied bitterly. "Plot and scheme and move pieces around his board like we're all just game pieces for his amusement. But I will not sit idle while dragons gather in the east." She moved to her desk and pulled out a sheet of parchment, dipping her quill in ink with sharp, angry motions. If Tywin wanted to play the long game, that was his choice. But Cersei had never been patient, and she would not start now. "What are you writing?" Jaime asked, rising from his chair with concern. "A letter to our friends in Braavos," Cersei said without looking up. "The Iron Bank has no love for dragons or Targaryens. They remember what happened to their investments when the Mad King burned King's Landing." "Cersei, you can't." "I can and I will," she cut him off. "Gold wins wars as surely as swords, and no one has more gold than the Iron Bank. If they can be convinced that Jon Snow and his Dragon Queen pose a threat to their interests." She didn't need to finish the thought. The Iron Bank of Braavos was ruthless in protecting its investments, and they had resources that even the Lannisters couldn't match. A word in the right ear, a purse of gold in the right hand, and even dragons could be brought low. "You're playing with fire," Jaime warned. Cersei looked up at him, her green eyes blazing with determination and fury. "Then I'll burn brighter than any dragon." As she sealed the letter with her personal seal, Cersei allowed herself a cold smile. Jon Snow might have dragons and Dothraki, but she had something more dangerous, the desperate fury of a mother protecting her children. And there was no force in the world more destructive than that. The game was far from over, and Cersei Lannister intended to win. The morning mist clung to the waters of the narrow sea as Jon Snow stood upon the deck of his flagship, watching the distant spires of Braavos emerge from the gray horizon. Behind him stretched a fleet of nearly 200 vessels, captured Pentoshi galleys, Qohorek warships, and Dothraki raiders that had been hastily converted for naval warfare. The sight would have been impossible to imagine mere months ago. Yet here it was, the bastard of Winterfell commanding a fleet that rivaled those of the greatest powers in Essos. "The arsenal of Braavos," Daenerys said, joining him at the rail. Her violet eyes studied the massive shipyards that dominated the city's harbor, where the famous Braavosi fleet was built and maintained. "They say it can launch 100 warships in a single day." "Then it's fortunate we're not giving them 100 days," Jon replied, his gray eyes hard as winter steel. The wind whipped his dark hair as he turned to address his captains, a mix of former sellswords, Dothraki bloodriders who had learned to fight at sea, and Pentoshi nobles who had thrown their lot in with the young conqueror. "Remember," Jon called out, his voice carrying across the deck, "we're not here to sack the city or slaughter innocents. Braavos funded the Golden Company's attack on us, but the common people are not our enemies. We come to liberate, not to destroy." Captain Grelio, the grizzled Pentoshi seaman who had become Jon's admiral, nodded approvingly. "The blockade is in position, my lord. No ship enters or leaves Braavos without our say-so." Jon had learned much about siege warfare from his conquest of Qohor. But this was different. Braavos was not just a city. It was the greatest trading hub in the known world, a place where gold flowed like water and information was more valuable than armies. To bring it to heel would require more than dragons and armies. It would require cutting off the very lifeblood that made the city great. Above them, Ygritte circled lazily through the morning sky. Balerion flew higher, his massive form casting shadows on the water below as he patrolled the outer edges of their formation. "Signal the fleet," Jon commanded. "Begin the blockade." The Braavosi response was swift and predictable. Within hours of Jon's fleet taking position around their harbor, a delegation of purple-cloaked officials sailed out under a flag of parley. Jon received them aboard his flagship, flanked by Daenerys and his most trusted captains. The lead delegate was a thin, sharp-faced man with the bearing of someone accustomed to being the smartest person in any room. He wore the purple and silver of a Braavosi magister, and his voice dripped with condescension as he spoke. "I am Magister Antrian of the Iron Bank," he announced, his common tongue heavily accented but precise. "I come to speak with the wolf pup with wings. I believe you're called in the taverns." Jon felt the insult like a physical blow, but his expression remained calm. Around him his captains bristled with anger, hands moving instinctively toward their weapons. Daenerys' jaw tightened, and Jon could sense the heat building in her blood. "You may call me Lord Snow," Jon replied evenly, "or Your Grace, if you prefer accuracy to insults." Antrian's smile was thin and mocking. "Your Grace? How presumptuous. You are a bastard boy with stolen ships and borrowed dragons, playing at being a king. Braavos has weathered storms far greater than you. Child, we have gold enough to hire every sellsword company in Essos. Fleets enough to sweep your rabble from the seas." "And yet," Jon said, his voice growing colder, "your golden company lies broken, your hired swords are dead, or serving me, and your precious city is under blockade. Tell me, Magister, how much gold is Braavos losing with each passing hour that no ships can enter or leave your harbor?" The Magister's confidence flickered for just a moment. "You cannot maintain this blockade indefinitely. Your men will grow restless, your supplies will run low, and winter storms will scatter your fleet like leaves." Jon stepped closer, his gray eyes boring into the Braavosi's pale ones. "I conquered Qohor in 3 days, Magister. I united nearly 30,000 men under my banner. I defeated Golden Company in a single battle. Do you truly believe I lack the patience or the resources to wait out Braavos?" To emphasize his point, Ygritte chose that moment to descend from the sky, landing on the ship's mainmast with a thunderous crash that made the entire vessel shudder. Her bronze eyes fixed on the Braavosi delegation, and a low rumble emerged from her throat. Not quite a roar, but a clear warning. Tyrion paled visibly, but his voice remained steady. "Dragons can be killed, boy. Braavos has resources you cannot imagine." "Then use them," Jon said simply. "But know this, every day you delay, every hour you waste on empty threats, costs your city more gold than most lords see in a lifetime. How long before your own people begin to question the wisdom of their leaders?" The delegation departed without reaching any agreement. But Jon could see the doubt in their eyes. Braavos might have vast wealth, but wealth was useless if it couldn't flow. And Jon's blockade was choking off that flow with ruthless efficiency. The siege of Braavos was unlike anything Jon had experienced before. There were no walls to breach, no gates to storm. Instead, it was a battle of endurance and economics, fought with ledgers as much as swords. Each day brought new reports from his captains. Marish galleys turned away at sword point. Lyseni pleasure barges forced to seek other ports. Lyseni trading cogs sitting empty in harbors across the narrow sea because they couldn't reach their intended destination. By the third day, the first cracks began to show. A group of Braavosi merchants approached Jon's fleet under a flag of truce, offering to pay tribute in exchange for safe passage for their ships. Jon accepted their gold but maintained the blockade. A message that individual deals would not save the city as a whole. By the 7th day, riots had broken out in the poorer districts of Braavos. The common people, dependent on trade for their livelihoods, were growing desperate as work dried up and food prices soared. Jon watched the smoke rising from the city's streets and felt a pang of guilt, but he hardened his heart. The Iron Bank and the Magisters had chosen this path when they funded his enemies. It was on the 10th day that everything changed. Jon was reviewing reports in his cabin when Captain Grolio burst through the door, his weathered face pale with shock. "My lord," he gasped, "you need to see this." A boat approaches under the flag of the Sea Lord himself. Jon emerged onto the deck to find his entire crew staring in amazement at the approaching vessel. It was a sleek Braavosi galley, its purple sails bearing the silver seahorse of the city's ruler. But what drew every eye was the figure standing at its prow, a man in elaborate robes whose very presence seemed to command respect. "The Sea Lord of Braavos," Daenerys breathed, joining Jon at the rail. "He's coming himself." The galley pulled alongside Winter's Bite, and the Sea Lord climbed aboard with the dignity of a man accustomed to absolute authority. He was older than Jon had expected, perhaps 60 years, with silver hair and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. His robes were purple silk shot through with silver thread, and he wore a crown of carved whalebone that marked his office. "I am Ferrego Antarion, Sea Lord of Braavos," he announced, his voice carrying easily across the deck. "I come to speak with Jon Snow, the Wolf King of the East." Jon stepped forward, inclining his head respectfully. Whatever else the Septilord might be, he was a ruler in his own right, and Jon had learned the value of courtesy between equals. "Your Grace," Jon said formally, "I am honored by your presence." The Sea Lord studied him for a long moment, those sharp eyes taking in everything. Jon's bearing, his clothes, the way his men looked to him for guidance. When he spoke again, his tone was thoughtful rather than hostile. "You are younger than I expected," he said finally. "But then, youth and ambition often go hand in hand. Tell me, Lord Snow, what is it you want from Braavos?" "Justice," Jon replied without hesitation. "Your Iron Bank funded the Golden Company's attack on my people. Innocent men died, because Braavos chose to support my enemies. I want acknowledgement of that wrong, and also I want you to end slavery and injustice in your city, and an assurance it will not happen again. And if we refuse," Jon gestured toward the city, where smoke still rose from the riots in the lower districts, "then your city continues to bleed gold until your own people force you to reconsider. I can maintain this blockade for months, Your Grace. Can Braavos survive that long without trade?" The Sea Lord was quiet for a long moment, his eyes moving from Jon to Daenerys to the dragons circling overhead. When he spoke again, his voice held a note of grudging respect. "You fight like a Braavosi," he said. "Not with overwhelming force, but with precision and patience." "Very well, Lord Snow. Braavos acknowledges its miscalculation regarding the Golden Company. We offer reparations of 200,000 gold dragons, and a formal treaty of non-aggression, and the rules you want to imply as Braavos as many other businesses that profit more than slavery." It was a generous offer, more than Jon had dared hope for, but before he could respond, the Sea Lord continued. "However, there are those in my city who believe more direct action is warranted. The Iron Bank has deep pockets and long memories. They have already reached out to certain specialists." Jon felt a chill that had nothing to do with the sea breeze. "Faceless men." The Sea Lord nodded gravely. "3 of them, already paid and contracted. I cannot stop them. No one can. Once the price is paid and the target chosen, I tell you this as a courtesy. One ruler to another." The news sent a ripple of fear through Jon's crew. The Faceless Men of Braavos were legendary assassins, servants of the many-faced god who could take any appearance, kill anyone anywhere. Kings and emperors had fallen to their blades, and no amount of guards or walls could keep them out. "When?" Jon asked, his voice steady despite the ice in his veins. "They are already here," the Sea Lord said quietly. "Among your crew, your captains, perhaps even your closest advisors. You will never see them coming." That night, Jon barely slept. Every shadow seemed to hide a blade, every friendly face a potential mask. His guards were tripled, food tasters employed, but he knew it was likely useless. If the Faceless Men wanted him dead, he would die. It was near dawn when they came. Jon was standing on the deck, watching the sunrise paint the waters gold, when he felt the presence behind him. He turned slowly, his hand moving to his sword, and found himself facing 3 figures in simple sailor's garb. They could have been anyone, crew members, merchants, passengers, but their eyes gave them away. Cold, empty, the eyes of death itself. "Jon Snow," the center figure said, its voice neither male nor female, young nor old. "The Iron Bank of Braavos has paid for your death." Jon drew his sword. the Valyrian steel singing as it cleared its sheath. Around him, his guards rushed forward, but the faceless men paid them no heed. Their attention was fixed entirely on their target. "I know," Jon said quietly. "I've been expecting you." The lead assassin tilted its head, a gesture that would have been curious in any other context but was merely unsettling here. "You do not beg for your life. You do not offer gold or power. Why?" "Because begging won't save anyone," Jon replied, "and because some things are worth dying for." The three figures exchanged glances, some silent communication passing between them. Then, to Jon's amazement, they began to back away. "We cannot take this life," the lead assassin said, its voice carrying a note of something that might have been wonder. "The many-faced god has no wish to kill Azor Ahai Reborn. We rejected them once before. But this time we come here only to meet you, and see for ourselves, if you have the courage to face death, as death and life are the sides of the same coin. Without one, the other cannot maintain balance. And soon when the darkness will rise, this balance will be affected, which is why you are needed to grow more powerful, as you are now, and courage alone will not save you from what is to come." The words hit Jon like a physical blow. Azor Ahai, the legendary hero of ancient prophecy, the prince that was promised, the one who would be reborn to fight the darkness. He had heard the name whispered in Thoros' cups, seen it written in old texts, and heard from many red priests, but never imagined that faceless men also knew of it. "I'm not," he began, but the faceless men were already melting back into the crowd of sailors and soldiers. Within moments, they had vanished as completely as if they had never been there at all. Word of the faceless men's refusal spread through the fleet like wildfire, and from there to the city of Braavos itself. Within hours, crowds had gathered on the docks, staring out at Jon's ships with a mixture of awe and fear. The faceless men had never refused a contract, never failed to complete an assassination once paid. Their refusal to kill Jon Snow was seen as a sign from the gods themselves. By midday, the Sea Lord returned with a much larger delegation. This time, he was accompanied by representatives from every major faction in Braavos, the Iron Bank, the merchant guilds, even the mysterious keyholders who controlled the city's most ancient secrets. "Lord Snow," the Sea Lord said, his voice carrying a respect that had been absent before. "Braziels, we offer not just reparations, but alliance. 5,000 of our finest soldiers and marines, a dozen warships, and the friendship of the greatest city in Essos." Jon looked out over the delegation, seeing the fear and awe in their eyes. The refusal of the faceless men had changed everything, transforming him from a dangerous enemy into something approaching a religious figure. It was power beyond anything he had imagined, but it came with a weight that made his shoulders ache. "I accept your terms," he said finally, "but know this, Braavos will be judged by its actions, not its words. Betray me again, and next time I will not be so merciful." As the Braavosi delegation departed to formalize the surrender, Jon found himself alone with Daenerys on the deck. She studied his face with those violet eyes that seemed to see everything. "Azor Ahai," she said quietly. "Do you believe it?" Jon was quiet for a long moment, watching the sun set over the conquered city. "I don't know what I believe anymore," he admitted. "But I know this, whether I'm a hero of prophecy or just a bastard with dragons, I have responsibilities now, to you, to our people, to everyone who looks to us for protection." Daenerys took his hand, her fingers intertwining with his. "Then we'll face those responsibilities together. Ice and fire, wolf and dragon." Jon squeezed her hand, drawing strength from her presence. The conquest of Braavos was complete, but he knew it was only the beginning. Word of his victory would spread across Essos and beyond, reaching the ears of kings and queens, of those who would see him as savior and those who would see him as threat. The game was growing larger, the stakes higher, and Jon Snow, bastard of Winterfell, conqueror of cities, the man the faceless men would not kill, stood at the center of it all, carrying the hopes and fears of 2 continents on his shoulders. Behind him, the black sails of his fleet caught the evening wind, carrying him toward whatever destiny awaited in the days to come. The fever came upon Daenerys 3 days after their departure from Braavos, striking her down like a bolt from the clear blue sky. One moment she was standing beside Jon on the deck of Winter's Bite, discussing their route to Lys, and the next she was collapsing into his arms, her skin burning with an unnatural heat that made even Jon's fire-touched hands recoil. "Get Thoros," Jon commanded, lifting Daenerys in his arms as her violet eyes rolled back, showing only white. Now, the Red Priest arrived within moments, his weathered face grave as he examined the unconscious Targaryen princess. Her breathing was shallow and rapid, and her silver-gold hair was already damp with sweat, despite the cool sea breeze. "Dragon fever," Thoros said quietly, his voice heavy with concern. "I've read of it in the old texts, but never seen it myself. It comes when the dragon blood runs too hot, when the fire within threatens to consume the vessel that contains it." Jon felt his heart clench with fear. "Can you help her?" "I fear this is beyond my power alone," Thoros replied, his dark eyes troubled. "The fire in her blood burns too fierce. Without intervention, it will consume her from within." They carried Daenerys to her cabin, where her 3 dragon eggs rested in their ornate chest, ancient relics from old Valyria that had been cold as stone for over a century. Now, as Daenerys' fever raged, something extraordinary began to happen. The eggs started to warm, their fossilized surfaces taking on a faint, pulsing glow. "The eggs?" Jon breathed, kneeling beside the bed where Daenerys lay, writhing in fevered dreams. "They're responding to her." Thoros moved closer, his eyes widening as he studied the phenomenon. "The dragons within, they can sense their mother's distress, but these eggs have been dead for generations. How can they—" His words were cut off as one of the eggs, a beautiful specimen with scales of deep green and bronze, suddenly cracked down the middle. But instead of life emerging from within, a soft golden light began to seep out, flowing like liquid fire toward Daenerys' burning form. "Byrilor's light," Thoros whispered, "the dragon within, it's giving its life essence to save her." Jon watched in amazement and sorrow as the light from the cracking egg enveloped Daenerys, sinking into her skin like water into parched earth. Her fevered thrashing began to calm, her breathing growing deeper and more regular. But the egg continued to crack and crumble, its ancient shell turning to ash as the dragon within sacrificed itself for its mother's life. "It's working," Jon said, taking Daenerys' hand as her fever finally began to break. "The dragon, it saved her." But the miracle was not yet complete. As the first egg crumbled to nothing, the remaining 2 began to pulse with renewed vigor. The life essence that had been released seemed to flow into them, awakening something that had slumbered for over a century. The second egg, cream and gold with veins of deep red, began to crack with sounds like breaking bells. From within came a tiny cry, high and sweet, as a dragon no larger than a cat emerged into the world. Its scales were pale gold, touched with cream, and its eyes were like molten amber. It looked around with the wonder of new life, then immediately sought out Daenerys, climbing onto her chest with tiny claws. "Viserion," Daenerys whispered, her voice weak but clear as consciousness returned to her violet eyes. "For my brother." The third egg followed moments later, producing a dragon of deep green with bronze highlights. It was slightly larger than its golden sibling, and its eyes were the color of fresh spring grass. This one seemed drawn to both Jon and Daenerys equally, perching between them as if recognizing both as its parents. "Rhaegal," Daenerys said, reaching out to stroke the green dragon's tiny head. "For Rhaegal." Jon felt tears on his cheeks as he looked at the newborn dragons, then at the pile of ash that had once been the third egg. "One gave its life so the others could live," he said quietly. "So you could live?" "Dragons understand sacrifice," Thoros said, his voice filled with reverence. "The one that died, it knew its purpose was to ensure the survival of its mother and siblings. In death, it achieved a kind of immortality." Daenerys struggled to sit up, cradling both tiny dragons against her chest. They seemed to calm her remaining fever, their small bodies radiating a gentle warmth that was healing rather than burning. "I can feel them," she whispered. "They're part of me, connected to my very soul, and I can feel the third one too. The one that saved me. Its essence lives on in them. In me." Jon helped her to her feet, marveling at how quickly her strength was returning. The dragon fever that had nearly killed her was gone, replaced by a vitality that seemed to glow from within. "The men need to see this," Jon said, his mind already turning to the implications. 2 more dragons, born from eggs that were thought dead for generations. "When word spreads, when it does, the world will know that the Age of Dragons has truly returned," Daenerys finished. "Not just through conquest, but through rebirth itself." They emerged onto the deck together, Daenerys carrying Viserion and Rhaegal, while Jon walked beside her. The effect on the crew was immediate and profound. Many voices and announcements arose, and all of the ships knew of it. 35,000 men, 6,000 Dothraki warriors, the rest a mix of freed slaves, sellswords from across Essos, and Braavos marines, most present on this ship and others in smaller ones, sailing beside but clear to the view, fell to their knees as one, their voices raised in a cheer that could be heard across the water. Above them, Ugrich and Great Ballion circled in response to their smaller siblings' cries, their own roars shaking the very air. Ugrich had grown to the size of a small building now, her bronze scales gleaming in the afternoon sun, while Ballion's massive form cast shadows on the water below, his 100-foot wingspan a testament to the power they commanded. 4 dragons! Someone shouted from the crowd, and the cry was taken up by others. The dragons have returned. Ice and fire united. Jon raised his hand for silence, and the fleet fell quiet with the discipline of veteran soldiers. When he spoke, his voice carried clearly across the water, reaching every ship in their formation. Today we have witnessed a miracle, he called out. From death came life. From sacrifice came salvation. These dragons were born not from fire and blood alone, but from love and sacrifice. They represent not just our power, but our purpose, to protect those who cannot protect themselves, to free those who are enslaved, to bring justice to those who have been wronged. The cheers that followed seemed to shake the very sea itself, from the flagship to the smallest transport. 35,000 voices raised in acclamation of their leaders and the dragons that would carry them to victory. But even as Jon basked in the moment, he felt the weight of the sacrifice that had made it possible. Somewhere in the ashes of that third egg lay the remains of a dragon that had chosen death so that others might live. It was a reminder that even in victory, there was always a price to be paid. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Jon stood with Daenerys at the prow of their flagship. The newborn dragons had fallen asleep in her arms, exhausted by their entry into the world, while their larger siblings continued to patrol the skies above. 4 dragons, Daenerys said softly, her violet eyes reflecting the dying light. More than any Targaryen has commanded since the Dance of Dragons. And 35,000 men who would follow us to the ends of the earth, Jon added. We've come far from that night in Penthouse, when we first met. Daenerys leaned against him, careful not to disturb the sleeping dragons. The one that died, I can still feel it, sometimes, like an echo in my blood. It's part of us now, part of our story. Jon nodded, understanding. The sacrifice of the unnamed dragon had saved more than just Daenerys' life. It had ensured the continuation of their cause, their dream of a better world. In giving its life, the dragon had become something greater than itself. We'll honor its sacrifice, Jon promised. Every city we liberate, every chain we break, every life we save, it will be in memory of the dragon that chose love over life. As night fell over their fleet, Jon held Daenerys close and listened to the gentle breathing of the newborn dragons. 4 dragons, 35,000 men, and the weight of destiny itself. It was a burden and a blessing that would shape the world to come. The Age of Dragons had returned, forged in sacrifice and tempered by love, and Jon Snow and Daenerys Targaryen would be its heralds, carrying fire and hope to every corner of the known world. 1.5 years has passed since his conquest of Braavos. He wanted to complete his conquest of all the remaining free cities back then. But after leaving Braavos, there were many public and political issues that arose with his growing territory, and he was so busy solving these matters and stabilizing situations that time flowed away like water. He had to go personally to each city and settlement to address his people and listen to their sufferings and complaints to grow as a good king and leader. The morning sun cast long shadows across the disputed lands, as Jon Snow's vast army prepared for what would become known as the War of Three Cities. Word had reached him through his network of spies and former slaves that Myr, Lys, and Tyrish had been conspiring again and are planning to unite their armies in attack. Now, with summer in full bloom and his forces stronger than ever, Jon meant to collect payment for their treachery. Ghost padded silently beside Jon's destrier, as they rode at the head of the column, the direwolf's red eyes scanning the horizon with predatory intelligence. The beast had grown massive over the years now, almost 2 years old, big in size, his white fur marked with the scars of countless battles. Like his master, Ghost had learned that mercy was a luxury they could rarely afford. Your Grace, Ser Jorah Mormont rode up alongside him, his weathered face grim beneath his helm. Our scouts report Mart's rolls are heavily manned. They've called in sellsword companies from across Essos. The remaining second sons, the wind-blown. What remains of the company of the cat? Jon nodded, unsurprised. Of the three cities, Myr had always been the most martial, its crossbow makers and lenscrafters wealthy enough to buy the finest steel and the most experienced killers. And their fleet. 40 war galleys in the harbor, plus merchant vessels they've pressed into service, Jorah replied. Admiral Lorraine reports our ships currently there outnumber theirs 3-1, but they know these waters better than we do. Behind them, the sound of marching feet created a steady rhythm that had become the heartbeat of Jon's revolution. Around 40,000 freedmen and sellswords followed his banners, now their ranks swollen by those who had flocked to his cause after each victory. Former slaves from a dozen nations marched alongside Dothraki, horsemen, unsullied spearmen, and northern knights who had followed him across the narrow sea. And above them all, casting shadows that sent ripples of fear through enemy ranks wherever they appeared, flew Jon's dragons. Balerion had grown magnificent in the years since his travel began. Ygritte's hide rippled with muscle as she soared overhead. They were not yet the monsters that original Balerion the Black Dread had been, but they were large enough to reduce cities to ash, and every magistrate from Braavos to Slaver's Bay knew it. The city of Myr rose from the eastern coast like a crown of white stone, its famous walls gleaming in the afternoon sun as Jon's army crested the final hill. The sight was impressive, concentric rings of fortifications that had never fallen to siege, towers that bristled with the finest crossbows gold could buy, and a harbor protected by a massive chain that could bar entry to any fleet. Jon studied the city's defenses with the eye of a seasoned commander. 3 years of constant warfare had taught him to read fortifications like a book, to see the weak points that others might miss. Myr's walls were high and thick, yes, but they had been built in an age before dragons returned to the world. Send the herald, Jon commanded. Offer them the same terms I gave Braavos. Surrender, abolish slavery, and join the new order willingly. Refuse and face the consequences. The herald rode forward, under a banner of parley, his voice carrying across the walls as he delivered Jon's ultimatum. The response came in the form of crossbow bolts that sent the man scrambling back to safety, his horse screaming as a quarrel took it in the flank. Well, a commander observed dryly. I believe that's their answer. Jon's face remained impassive, but those who knew him well could see the cold fury building behind his gray eyes. He had learned to hate unnecessary bloodshed, but he had also learned that sometimes it was the only language certain men understood. Sershukshara, deploy the fleet. I want that harbor sealed. Nothing gets in or out. Coordinate with the siege engineers. I want trebuchets and scorpions positioned by nightfall. He paused, his gaze lifting to where his dragons circled overhead. And send word to the Dothraki. Let them raid the countryside. I want every farm and village within 50 miles to know that Myr's defiance brings only suffering. But don't harm normal public, only soldiers, guards and officials. The siege began at dawn. Balerion struck first, diving from the morning clouds to rake the eastern wall with dragonfire. The ancient stones, weathered by centuries of salt spray, cracked and blackened under the intense heat. Defenders screamed as they were caught in the flames, their crossbows melting in their hands as they tried desperately to bring down the great beast. Ruckus followed, targeting the harbor where Myr's war galleys waited. The bronze dragon's fire turned the water to steam as ships exploded in gouts of flame and splinters. Within an hour, half of Myr's fleet was burning wreckage, floating on the tide. 7 hells, breathed one of Jon's captains, watching from the siege lines as dragons carved through the city's defenses like a sword through silk. How do you fight something like that? You don't, Jon replied quietly. That's the point. The siege engines added their own thunder to the dragon's fury. Massive stones hurled from trebuchets smashed into walls already weakened by dragon fire, while scorpion bolts sought targets among the defenders. Jon's archers, many of them former slaves who had learned their craft fighting for their freedom, sent clouds of arrows over the walls to keep the crossbowmen's heads down. But it was the psychological warfare that truly won the day. Every few hours, one of the dragons would make another pass over the city, their shadows falling like the promise of death over the white stones. Fires burned throughout Myr as dragonfire caught and spread, and the smell of smoke and fear hung heavy in the air. On the third day, a white banner appeared on the walls. The delegation that emerged from Myr's gates was a sorry sight. Magisters in singed robes, their faces haggard from sleepless nights, spent listening to dragons roar overhead. Their leader, a fat man whose purple-dyed beard had been badly singed, prostrated himself before Jon's throne. "Your Grace," the man wheezed, "I am Magister Ordello Haratus, first speaker of Myr's council. We wish to discuss terms." Jon studied the man with cold eyes. The terms were given 3 days ago. Surrender unconditionally, abolish slavery, and submit to my rule. Nothing has changed except the number of your dead. "But Your Grace, surely we can reach some accommodation. Can you?" Jon's voice cut through the man's pleading like a blade. "Tell me, Magister, how much gold did your city contribute to the Golden Company's campaign against me?" The fat man's face went pale beneath his singed beard. That is to say, 50,000 gold dragons," Jon continued remorselessly. "Enough to buy swords for 5,000 men. How many of my people died because of your gold? Do you think?" Silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant roar of one of the dragons circling overhead. Finally, Magister Haratus found his voice. "We accept your terms, Your Grace. Unconditionally." Word of Myr's fall spread across the narrow sea, faster than wildfire. By the time Jon's fleet appeared on the horizon off Lys, white banners were already flying from every tower in the city. The Lyseni had always been pragmatists above all else. Famous for their beauty, their pleasure houses, and their skill at poison, they understood better than most that survival often required bending the knee to superior force. When the dragons cast their shadows over the city's pale pink walls, the magisters of Lys made their choice with characteristic efficiency. "Your Grace," the delegation that met Jon at the harbor was led by a woman of extraordinary beauty, her silver gold hair elaborately braided and her violet eyes bright with intelligence. "I am Lysana Roger, speaking for the conclave of Lys. We have heard of your great victories, and we come to offer our submission." Jon studied her carefully. The Lyseni were known for their subtle poisons and honeyed words, and he had learned to trust neither beautiful faces nor smooth tongues. "And what of slavery in your city, my lady?" "Already abolished, Your Grace," she replied smoothly. "Our conclave voted unanimously yesterday. All slaves have been freed, and we have prepared compensation for those who wish to leave the city." "How convenient," Tyrion murmured from beside Jon's chair. "And I suppose this has nothing to do with the dragons currently circling overhead." Lysana's smile never wavered. "We are a practical people, my lord. When the winds change, wise sailors adjust their sails." Jon leaned forward in his chair, his gray eyes fixed on the Lyseni woman's face. "Practicality I can respect. But I wonder, what assurance do I have that this submission is genuine, that you won't simply wait for me to leave and return to your old ways?" "You have our word, Your Grace. The word of slavers and poisoners." Jon's voice was soft, but there was steel beneath the silk. "Forgive me if I find that insufficient." The woman's composure cracked slightly, but she recovered quickly. "What would you have of us, Your Grace?" "Hostages," Jon replied without hesitation. "The children of every magister, every merchant prince, every person of importance in this city. They will come with me, to be educated in the new ways, and to ensure their parents' continued loyalty." A murmur ran through the Lyseni delegation, but Lysana merely nodded. "It shall be as you command, Your Grace. Though I would ask, what guarantee do we have for their safety?" "The same guarantee you gave your slaves," Jon replied coldly. "My word." The message was clear, and the Lyseni were nothing if not quick to understand implications. Within hours, nearly 100 children and young adults were being escorted aboard Jon's ships, their parents watching from the docks with carefully neutral expressions. But Jon was not without mercy. As his fleet prepared to depart, he addressed the gathered crowd from the deck of his flagship. "People of Lys," his voice carried clearly across the water, amplified by the natural acoustics of the harbor. "You have chosen wisdom over pride, and for that, your city will prosper. But know this, I have eyes and ears in every corner of Essos now. If any of you think to return to the old ways, if any of you think to profit from human misery again, my dragons will return. And next time, there will be no white banners, no terms, no mercy." As if summoned by his words, Drogon appeared overhead, his great wings blotting out the sun as he circled the harbor once before disappearing into the eastern sky. The message was received. By the time Jon's fleet reached Tyrosh, the city had already surrendered. The famous Free City, known throughout the world for its dyes and its brightly colored architecture, flew banners of submission from every tower. The harbor was filled with merchant vessels loaded with gifts, chests of gold, bolts of the finest silk, rare spices from the Summer Isles, and casks of the legendary Tyroshi brandy. Your Grace, the Archon of Tyrosh, was a thin man with a magnificently dyed purple beard, his robes a riot of colors that would have been garish anywhere else but seemed perfectly natural in the Rainbow City. I am Archon Daemon Quahuos, and I come to offer you not just our submission but our alliance. Jon raised an eyebrow. Alliance? Indeed, Your Grace. Tyrosh has always been a city of merchants and traders. We understand the value of being on the winning side of history. The Archon gestured to the gifts arrayed before Jon's throne. We offer not just our surrender, but our active support. Our dyes, our ships, our trade networks, all at your service. And slavery? Already abolished, Your Grace. We took the liberty of freeing all slaves the moment your dragons appeared on the horizon. We are, as I said, practical people. Tyrion leaned over to whisper in Jon's ear. Careful, Your Grace. The Tarosai are almost as slippery as the Lysini, just more colorful about it. Jon nodded slightly, then addressed the Archon directly. Your practicality is noted, Archon Kolforos. But I require more than pretty words and expensive gifts. If Tyrosh truly wishes to be my ally rather than merely my subject, you will prove it. How may we serve, Your Grace? Your city funded the Golden Company's campaign against me. I want the names of every merchant, every magister, every person who contributed gold to that cause. I want their assets seized and distributed to the slaves you've just freed. And I want a new government established, one that includes representatives chosen by the freedmen, not just the old merchant families. The Archon's colorful face went pale, but he nodded quickly. It shall be done, Your Grace. Though I fear some of our more traditional citizens may object. Jon's smile was cold as winter. Then they can discuss their objections with my dragons and my army of men. Within a month, all 3 cities had been transformed. The great slave markets that had operated for centuries were torn down, their stones used to build schools and hospitals for the freedmen. The fighting pits were filled with earth and planted with gardens. The brothels that had trafficked in unwilling flesh were closed, their owners given a choice between exile and the headsman's axe. But Jon's revolution was about more than just abolition. In each city, he established new institutions. Councils that included both former slaves and former masters, courts that judged by law rather than gold, and schools that taught reading and writing to any who wished to learn. The response was not uniform. In Myr, several attempts were made to assassinate the new governors Jon had appointed, leading to public executions that sent a clear message about the price of defiance. In Lights, the transition was smoother, the former magisters adapting to their reduced circumstances with characteristic pragmatism. In Tyrosh, the colorful city embraced change with surprising enthusiasm, the freedmen taking to their new roles with energy and determination. It's remarkable, a man observed as he reviewed reports from all 3 cities. He has become Jon's chief administrator, his scholarly mind perfectly suited to the complex task of governing a growing empire. In just 1 month, literacy rates have increased by 30% in Tyrosh alone. Jon nodded, but his expression remained troubled. And the resistance? Growing, but fragmented, Sam replied, consulting his notes. The Sons of the Harpy have tried to establish cells in all 3 cities, but our network of informants has been effective at rooting them out. More concerning are the reports from Volantis and Slaver's Bay. They're forming a coalition. Let them, Jon said quietly. Every day we delay gives them more time to prepare, but it also gives us more time to grow stronger. And every freed slave who joins our cause is one less person they can call upon. Ghost lifted his great head from where he had been resting beside Jon's chair, red eyes fixing on something beyond the tent walls. A moment later, a messenger entered, bearing the black and red banners of former House Targaryen. Who is now he? Your Grace, the young man said, going to one knee. A raven from Westeros. Your father, Lord Eddard Stark, has sent a message for you. Jon took the scroll, his gray eyes scanning the elegant script. After 3 years of span, his father finally sent him a letter. John, my child, I hope you are doing well. There, my men in Essos has been informing me about your situation, there time to time, and I am very proud to say that what you have established there is far better than any king has done in the history of this world. You freed slaves, almost reduced injustice to common folks, and rebuilt governments. People in your territory are living far better than in any. Your little brother Bran, as you may know, full of vigor and a brave kid, I am very sad to inform you that he fell from the heights of a tower when climbing. He is in very serious condition right now. Maester had checked his conditions and had said he may not survive, and even if he did, after such injuries he may not be able to walk. Jon almost wiped the tears that were forming in his eyes, reading further. King Robert arrived in Winterfell with his family during these days. At first he talked to me alone, asking what your plans in Westeros are. As I am only able to guess your motivations, I have told him that your fight in Essos was only because of slavery, which is prohibited in Westeros anyway. So he does not have to worry about anything, and I will personally write you on this matter. I am telling this not to stop you from coming here. I just want to tell you that whatever choices you make in the future, Winterfell and your family is here to support you in any way we can. Then he told me his major purpose in coming here. He wants me to go to Red Keep with him. As his official, he wants me to accept the position of King's Hand. The previous one had died of old age. A natural death, he says. But I have a suspicion that it's not the only reason, and I cannot deny him as he is the king, and can force his decisions on anyone in his kingdom. By the time this letter reaches you, I may have reached there in Red Keep. If you have time, please visit Winterfell. Your brother has only heard stories of you and he may need your support and love in his difficult days. Your father Eddard Stark, Lord of Winterfell, and maybe now the hand of King Robert. The sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows across the courtyard of the Jon's mansion. Jon Snow stood at the edge of the training yard, his mind a tumultuous sea of thoughts. He had received a letter from his father, Eddard Stark, just days ago, and its words weighed heavily on his heart. Bran, his younger brother, had been injured in a fall, and Ned had left to take the position of Hand of the King. The letter urged Jon to visit Winterfell when he could, but with the political climate so volatile and the responsibilities weighing on him, that visit felt like a distant dream. Jon's thoughts were interrupted by the familiar sound of footsteps behind him. He turned to see Daenerys Targaryen approaching, her silver hair catching the light of the setting sun. She moved with a grace that always captivated him, yet today, her expression was tinged with concern. "Jon," she said softly, her voice a balm to his troubled soul. "You look as if the weight of the world is upon your shoulders." He forced a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "It's nothing I can't handle," he replied, though he knew it was a lie. The thought of Bran's injury gnawed at him, a constant reminder of his family's struggles back home. He had left Winterfell as Thoros' squire when Bran was just a toddler, and now the boy was hurt and Jon was far away.
Daenerys stepped closer, her presence grounding him. "You don't have to hide from me, Jon. I can see when something troubles you."
She reached out, placing a gentle hand on his arm, her touch igniting a spark of warmth in his chest. Jon sighed, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. "I received a letter from my father. Bran fell from a window. He's hurt, and my father is busy with the king. I wish I could be there for him." Her brow furrowed in sympathy. "I'm sorry, Jon. I know how much your family means to you." "I love them a lot," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "But sometimes I wonder if it's enough. I've seen so much death and destruction, and I fear that one day I won't be able to protect them. They are too far from here, and the game for the throne is about to start from what my spies in Westeros have told me. Tywin Lannister has been preparing for us for too long, and I fear he will do something to my father if he stays in Red Keep longer." Daenerys stepped closer, her eyes locking onto his. "You are stronger than you realize. You've already accomplished so much. You've freed cities, brought hope to the downtrodden, and fought against those who would see the innocent harmed." Jon shook his head, feeling unworthy of her praise. "But what good is it if I can't keep my family safe? If I lose them, then we'll build a world where no child grows nameless and unwanted," Daenerys said firmly, her voice filled with conviction. "A world where families are safe, where children can grow up without fear. Together, we can make that happen." Her words struck a chord deep within him. He had never shared his dreams with anyone, but in that moment he felt an overwhelming urge to open up to her. "Want that more than anything," he confessed, his heart racing. "I want to create a future where no one has to suffer like we have." Daenerys smiled, a radiant light in the dimming courtyard. "Then we will build it together, Jon. You are not alone in this fight." As she spoke those words, Jon felt a shift in the air between them. The weight of their shared burdens seemed to lighten, replaced by a warmth that enveloped them both. He took a step closer, drawn to her in a way he had never experienced before. Their eyes locked, and for a moment, the world around them faded away. The sounds of the bustling courtyard, the clanking of swords, and the distant cries of soldiers training all became a distant echo. It was just the two of them, standing on the precipice of something new, something profound. "Dany," he began, his voice trembling slightly. Before he could finish, Daenerys closed the distance between them, her hand moving to cup his cheek. The softness of her touch sent a jolt through him, igniting a fire he had kept buried for too long. "You don't have to say anything, Jon," she whispered, her breath warm against his skin. "Just know that I'm here for you." In that moment, Jon leaned in, closing the gap between them. Their lips met softly, a tentative exploration that quickly deepened as the heat of their emotions surged to the surface. It was a kiss filled with promise, with hope, and with the unspoken understanding that they were bound together by their shared struggles and dreams. As they pulled away, Jon searched her eyes, looking for reassurance. "What does this mean for us?" he asked, his heart racing. "With everything happening, can we really—" Daenerys placed a finger over his lips, silencing his doubts. "We will face whatever comes together. I will not let anything tear us apart. Jon, you mean too much to me." He felt a swell of emotion at her words, a mix of relief and joy flooding through him. "You're right," he said, determination filling his voice. "We'll face it all together." Their moment was interrupted by the distant roar of dragons, a reminder of the power they wielded and the challenges that lay ahead. Jon glanced up, seeing Balerion and the smaller dragons, Viserys and Rhaenyra, soaring through the sky, their massive wings casting shadows over the courtyard. They had grown significantly since hatching, now too large to fit comfortably in the confines of the Red Keep. Their presence was both awe-inspiring and terrifying, a constant reminder of the stakes involved in their fight for a better world. "Look at them," Daenerys said, her eyes sparkling with pride. "They are a symbol of our strength and our future." Jon nodded, feeling a sense of purpose wash over him. "We will protect them, just like we will protect each other, no matter what happens." As they stood together watching the dragons soar, Jon felt a renewed sense of hope. The journey ahead would be fraught with danger, but with Daenerys by his side, he believed they could overcome anything. They were more than allies, they were partners in a fight for a brighter future. "Come," Daenerys said, breaking the spell of silence. "There is still much to be done. We need to prepare for the council meeting and discuss our next steps." Jon took her hand, feeling the warmth of her skin against his. "I'm with you always." Together they walked back toward the heart of the Red Keep, side by side, ready to face the challenges that awaited them. The bond they had forged in that quiet moment was unbreakable, a spark that would guide them through the darkness ahead. As they entered the hall, Jon's heart swelled with determination. He was no longer just a squire or a Stark. He was part of something greater, a force for change alongside the woman he had come to love. With Daenerys by his side, he felt ready to take on the world. The sun hung low over Qohor, casting a golden hue across the bustling market square. Merchants shouted their wares, children darted between stalls, and the air was thick with the scent of spices and roasted meats. Yet amidst the vibrancy of the city, a storm was brewing. Daenerys Targaryen felt it in her bones, a sense of unease that had settled over her since the moment she had learned of her brother Viserys' arrival in the city. Jon Snow stood beside her, his presence a steady anchor as they walked through the marketplace. He had become her confidant, her protector, and in many ways, her heart. The bond they shared had deepened since their kiss, and now, as they prepared to face Viserys, she felt the weight of that connection more than ever. "Are you ready for this?" Jon asked, his voice low and filled with concern. He had seen the way Daenerys' hands trembled slightly, betraying her calm facade. Daenerys took a deep breath, her resolve hardening. "I must be. He is still my brother, no matter what he has become." As they approached the inn where Viserys had taken refuge, Jon's grip on her hand tightened. Remember, he is not the man you once knew. He is driven by greed and anger. You have to be careful. I know, she replied, her heart pounding in her chest, but I cannot let him think he can control me any longer. Inside the dimly lit inn, the atmosphere shifted. Viserys sat at a table, flanked by a couple of unsavory-looking men, his golden hair glinting in the flickering candlelight. He looked up as Daenerys entered, a sneer forming on his lips. Look who finally decided to show up, he mocked, his voice dripping with disdain. I thought you had forgotten your true family. Viserys, Daenerys said, her voice steady despite the turmoil within. You have no right to come here and demand anything from me. His expression darkened, and he rose from his seat, towering over her. Demand? I am your brother, Daenerys. You are still my property, my dragon. You belong with me, not here, playing queen among these filthy savages. Jon stepped forward, placing himself protectively in front of Daenerys. You will not threaten her, Viserys. She is free from your control. Viserys' eyes narrowed, and in an instant, the tension in the room escalated. You dare to defy me, bastard. You think you can protect her. You're nothing but a shadow, a mere squire. With a sudden, violent motion, Viserys lunged at Daenerys, his hand reaching for the dagger at his belt. Chaos erupted in the inn as patrons scrambled to escape the escalating confrontation. Jon moved swiftly, his instincts kicking in as he positioned himself between Daenerys and her brother. Get away from her, Jon shouted, grabbing Viserys' arm just as the dagger glinted in the low light. In the struggle, Viserys' men surged forward, but Jon was quicker. He twisted Viserys' arm, forcing him to drop the dagger. You're not gonna hurt her again. But in the chaos, one of Viserys' men drew a spear, aiming it at Jon. Daenerys gasped, her heart racing as she watched the scene unfold. Jon, look out, she cried. Before Jon could react, the spear flew through the air, piercing Viserys' side. Time seemed to slow as Daenerys watched her brother stagger back, shock and betrayal etched on his face. He clutched the wound, blood seeping through his fingers as he fell to the ground, gasping for breath. No, Daenerys screamed, rushing to his side. Viserys! Jon was at her side in an instant, wrapping an arm around her waist to steady her. Then he don't. But she couldn't hear him over the pounding of her heart. Viserys' eyes met hers, filled with a mixture of anger and pain. You were supposed to be mine, he gasped, the life fading from his voice. I was to reclaim the throne, with you at my side. Daenerys shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. You lost your way long ago, Viserys. You never cared for me, only for power. You're wrong, he croaked, his voice barely a whisper now. You are my sister. I will always want you. As the light faded from his eyes, Daenerys felt a profound emptiness settle over her. She had spent years trying to reconcile her feelings for her brother, trying to understand the bond they once shared. But now, as she knelt beside him, she realized that the boy she had known was gone, replaced by a man consumed by greed and hatred. Viserys, she whispered, her heart breaking. I wish you had found a better path. With a final shudder, he breathed his last, leaving Daenerys alone in the chaos of the inn, surrounded by the remnants of a life she had tried so hard to escape. Jon knelt beside her, pulling her close as she sobbed against his shoulder. He was lost long ago, he murmured, his voice soothing. You did what you had to do, Dudley. You are free now. She clung to him, the warmth of his presence a stark contrast to the cold reality of her brother's betrayal. I never wanted this, she cried, her voice muffled against his chest. I wanted a family, a brother I could trust. Jon stroked her hair gently, his heart aching for her pain. You are not alone. You have me, and together we will build a new family, one that is strong and united, not built on fear and betrayal. As the guards arrived to restore order, Daenerys felt a shift within herself. Viserys' death marked the severing of her ties to her old life, a life filled with manipulation and control. She was no longer bound by the expectations of a brother who had lost his way. With Jon by her side, she felt a flicker of hope ignite within her. They would face the future together, forging a new path that embraced love, loyalty, and strength. As the guards carried Viserys' lifeless body away, Daenerys took a deep breath. steeling herself for the challenges ahead. "Let's go," she said, wiping her tears away. "We have much to do." Jon nodded, standing tall beside her. Together they stepped out of the inn and into the vibrant streets of Qohor, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The shadows of the past were behind them, and with each step, Daenerys felt lighter, freer, and more determined than ever to reclaim her destiny. Jon also had to prepare for his journey to Westeros after finishing all this. The shadows of the hall loomed large as Jon Snow moved through the dimly lit corridors, his heart racing with urgency. The news he had received from his network of spies was troubling, to say the least. Whispers had reached him that one of the Lannister brothers had been responsible for pushing Ned Stark from the tower. Though which brother remained uncertain, more pressing was the confirmation of King Robert's death and Ned's subsequent capture. Jon stopped in a secluded alcove, his mind racing. He had to act swiftly. If Ned was to have any chance of escaping the clutches of the Lannisters, he needed to orchestrate a rescue without drawing attention to himself. He could not afford to be implicated in any way, especially given the precarious political landscape of King's Landing. "Gather the men," Jon instructed one of his trusted spies, a wiry man named Ser Jorah. "We need to move quickly. I want to ensure that Ned Stark is freed and taken to Robb's camp without anyone knowing it was us." Ser Jorah nodded, his expression serious. "We'll make it look like it's the work of Stark loyalists, just as you ordered. It will be done quietly." Jon felt a surge of determination. He had spent too long watching from the sidelines, and now was the time to act. "Make sure they have a safe route. The Lannister's will be on high alert after Robert's death. We cannot afford any mistakes." As Jorah hurried off to relay Jon's orders, Jon turned his thoughts to Robb. His brother was rallying their forces back to the north, and the Lancers would be confused by the sudden shift in Stark movements. If they believed Robb was retreating, they might let their guard down, making it the perfect opportunity for Jon's plan to unfold. In the dark of night, Jon's spies moved like shadows through the Red Keep, slipping past guards and evading detection. They reached the dungeons where Ned was imprisoned, a place filled with the stench of despair and hopelessness. With deft hands they overpowered the guards, ensuring that their actions went unnoticed by the Lannister loyalists. "Lord Stark," one of the spies whispered urgently as they unshackled him. "We're here to get you out." Ned looked up, his eyes filled with a mixture of surprise and gratitude. "Jon?" he asked, his voice hoarse from disuse. "It's not me, but I'm doing this for you," the spy replied, urgency in his tone. "We have to move quickly." They led Ned through the twisting passages of the Red Keep, evading patrols and slipping into the shadows. The air was thick with tension, but the Stark loyalists moved with purpose, their hearts set on freeing their lord. Meanwhile, in the north, Robb Stark was rallying his forces, preparing to march against the Lannisters. He had received word of his father's perilous situation, and the news of King Robert's death had ignited a fire within him. He was determined to protect his family and reclaim their honor. As Jon's spies delivered Ned to Robb's camp under the cover of darkness, the reunion was filled with emotion. Ned embraced his son tightly, relief washing over him. "You've done well, Robb. You've brought our family back together." Robb nodded, his expression fierce with determination. "We will not let the Lancers take what is ours. They will pay for their treachery." With Ned safe, the Stark forces began to regroup, their strategy shifting from defense to offense. The Lancers were left in a state of confusion, unsure of the Starks' next move. Jon could only hope that this would buy them the time they needed to prepare for what lay ahead. Back in Qohor, Jon stood overlooking the vast expanse of his territories. He had achieved what many thought impossible: control over Norvos, Qohor, Braavos, Myr, Lys, Tyrosh, Pentos, and even the loyalty of almost all the Dothraki tribes. His forces were strong, numbering nearly 50,000 men, bolstered by a powerful navy and 4 dragons, 2 massive and 2 young. As he prepared to leave for Winterfell, he knew he had to leave a strong presence behind. He decided to keep around 30,000 men stationed in Essos to guard his newly acquired territories, ready to respond if needed. The final preparations were underway, and Jon felt a sense of anticipation building within him. He had come so far, and now the time had come to return to Westeros, to reclaim his family's honor and fight for the future he envisioned alongside Daenerys. On the black walls of Qohor, the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and crimson. Jon stood beside Daenerys, their dragons circling overhead, their massive wings casting shadows over the stone battlements. "Essos is done," Jon said, his voice filled with resolve. "Westeros awaits." Daenerys looked at him, her eyes shining with determination. "Together we will forge a new path. We will not be bound by the past." As the last rays of sunlight dipped below the horizon, Jon and Daenerys shared a moment of understanding, a silent vow to face whatever challenges lay ahead together. With their dragons soaring above them, they prepared to begin their journey, the weight of their ambitions heavy but exhilarating. With a final glance at the lands they were leaving behind, Jon turned to Daenerys, and together they stepped forward, ready to reclaim their destinies in Westeros. The sun hung low over Qohor, casting long shadows across the bustling city below. Jon Snow stood atop the black walls of the fortress, his gaze fixed on the horizon. The news from his network of spies weighed heavily on him. He had just received word that one of the Lannister brothers had been responsible for pushing Bran Stark from the tower, though the identity of the culprit remained uncertain. More devastating was the confirmation of King Robert's death and Ned Stark's subsequent capture. Jon clenched his fists, anger coursing through him. His father had always taught him to value honor and loyalty, and now those principles felt like a distant memory in the treacherous Game of Thrones. He had to act swiftly to ensure Ned's safety. "Satyra," Jon called, summoning his trusted advisor. The wiry man approached, his expression serious. "We need to arrange for Ned's escape from King's Landing. I want it done quietly, without implicating us directly. It must look like it's the work of Stark loyalists." "Understood," Jorah replied, nodding. "I'll send word to our contacts in the city. We can create a diversion to draw attention away from the dungeons." Jon felt a surge of determination. "We must ensure he is taken safely to Robb's camp. The Lannisters will be on high alert after Robert's death, and we cannot afford any mistakes." As Jorah hurried off to relay Jon's orders, Jon's mind raced with thoughts of his family. Robb was rallying the forces in the north, and the sudden shift in Stark movements would confuse the Lannisters. If they believed Robb was retreating, it would give Jon's spies the perfect opportunity to execute their plan. Now only if his message reaches Robb safely, as his location is always changing. In the dark of night, Jon's spies moved like shadows through the winding streets of King's Landing. They slipped past guards and evaded detection, their hearts set on freeing Ned Stark from his grim prison. With deft hands, they overpowered the guards stationed at the dungeons, ensuring their actions went unnoticed. "Lord Stark," one of the spies whispered urgently as they unshackled him. "We're here to get you out. Lord Jon Snow gave us orders for your safety." Ned looked up, his eyes filled with a mixture of surprise and gratitude. "Jon," he rasped, his voice hoarse from disuse. "Yes, Lord Stark, we work for him, and Lady Sansa, along with Lady Arya, have been safely found and transported directly to Winterfell, to your castle." The spy replied, urgency in his tone. "We must move quickly." They led Ned through the twisting passages of the Red Keep, evading patrols and slipping into the shadows. The air was thick with tension, but the Stark loyalists moved with purpose, their hearts set on freeing their lord. Meanwhile, in the north, Robb Stark was rallying his forces, preparing to march against the Lannisters. He had received word of his father's perilous situation, and the news of King Robert's death had ignited a fire within him. He was determined to protect his family and reclaim their honor. As Jon's spies delivered Ned to Robb's camp under the cover of darkness, the reunion was filled with emotion. Ned embraced his son tightly, relief washing over him. "You've done well, Robb. You've brought our family honor." Robb nodded, his expression fierce with determination. "We will not let the Lannisters take what is ours. They will pay for their treachery." With Ned safe, the Stark forces began to regroup, their strategy shifting from offense to retreat. The Lannisters were left in a state of confusion, unsure of the Starks' next move. Jon could only hope that this would buy them the time they needed to prepare for what lay ahead. Back in Qohor, Jon stood overlooking the vast expanse of his territories. He had achieved what many thought impossible, control over Norvus, Qohor, Braavos, Myr, Lys, Tyrosh, Pentos, and even the loyalty of almost all the Dothraki tribes. His forces were strong, numbering nearly 70,000 men, bolstered by a powerful navy, and 4 dragons, 2 massive and 2 young. As he prepared to leave for Winterfell, he knew he had to leave a strong presence behind. He decided to keep around 30,000 men stationed in Essos to guard his newly acquired territories, ready to respond if needed. The final preparations were underway, and Jon felt a sense of anticipation building within him. He had come so far, and now the time had come to return to Westeros, to reclaim his family's honor and fight for the future he envisioned alongside Daenerys. On the black walls of Qohor, the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and crimson. Jon stood beside Daenerys, their dragons circling overhead, their massive wings casting shadows over the stone battlements. "Essos is done," Jon said, his voice filled with resolve. "Westeros awaits." Daenerys looked at him, her eyes shining with determination. "Together we will forge a new path. We will not be bound by the past." As the last rays of sunlight dipped below the horizon, Jon and Daenerys shared a moment of understanding, a silent vow to face whatever challenges lay ahead together. With their dragons soaring above them, they prepared to begin their journey, the weight of their ambitions heavy but exhilarating. With a final glance at the lands they were leaving behind, Jon turned to Daenerys, and together they stepped forward, ready to reclaim their destinies in Westeros.